Alright guys, so just today, the Supreme Court came down with a pretty major ruling in regards to whether or not Donald Trump can remain on the ballot after multiple different states like Maine and Illinois and specifically Colorado in this one brought challenges under the 14th Amendment saying basically because Trump aided and abetted in an insurrection on January 6th, therefore he is not constitutionally able to be on their state's ballot. The Supreme Court just today overwhelmingly basically threw out that decision and sided with Trump. So a little bit of details here on exactly what that means from NBC News, and then I'm going to show you guys some recent polling data that even as Trump is facing numerous different criminal and civil cases against him, things are not looking too good for Joe Biden as his 2024 challenger. So again, here are some of the details on the Supreme Court decision today. They say that the Supreme Court on Monday handed a sweeping win to former President Donald Trump by ruling that states cannot kick him off the ballot over his actions leading up to January 6th and the attack on the Capitol, bringing a swift end to a case with huge implications for the 2024 election. In an unsigned ruling with no dissent, so again, 9-0 ruling here, completely unanimous, the court reversed the Colorado Supreme Court, which had determined that Trump could not serve again as president under Section 3 of the Constitution's 14th Amendment. They say the provision, again, prohibits those who previously held government positions but later engaged in insurrection from running for various offices. And it's not just engaged in insurrection, it's actually also anybody who gave aid or comfort to those who did engage in insurrection. So I do think that, you know, if you look at what January 6th was, if you look at the lead up to January 6th and Trump's participation in that, I don't think you could possibly say that he didn't at least give aid and comfort to those who participated in an insurrection at the Capitol on that day. But that's actually not the question that the Supreme Court addressed in this ruling. They were basically skirting around the decision of whether or not Trump engaged in insurrection, and were instead basically making a logistical argument that states do not have the authority to decide whether or not a candidate can be on the ballot, and that instead can only be delegated by Congress, right? So they continue here. They say the court said that the Colorado Supreme Court had wrongly assumed that states can determine whether a presidential candidate or other candidate for federal office is ineligible. The ruling makes it clear that Congress, not states, has to set rules on how the 14th Amendment provision can be enforced against federal office seekers. As such, the decision applies to all states, not just Colorado, so also Maine and Illinois and any other states that were hoping to bring challenges on the 14th Amendment. They say states can retain the power to bar people from running for state office before appealing or from appearing on the ballot under Section 3, right? Which is something we've actually seen where like lower level politicians who are running for office were barred from their positions because of their participation in January 6th. So I guess this just applies to federal seats like the House of Representatives or the Senate or the presidency, right? And they say, quote, because the Constitution makes Congress rather than the states responsible for enforcing Section 3 against all federal office holders and candidates, we reverse, okay? And they also say that by deciding the case on that legal question, the court avoided, again, analysis of whether or not he actually engaged in an insurrection. And it comes a day before the Colorado primary is set to take place, because tomorrow we're going to have the Super Tuesday primary elections. So I'm going to have coverage on that tomorrow. But they say minutes after the ruling, of course, Trump went on to hail the decision in an all-capital letter post on social media, writing, "Big win for America, big win." And it is a big win, you know, for him at least. Now, there's obviously a lot to go forward on here in terms of Trump's legal troubles moving forward. Here from the AP, they talk a little bit more about that. They say Trump's legal travels ahead. Few observers expected the Supreme Court to keep Trump off the ballot, but he's facing far more perilous legal road ahead. The first of Trump's criminal trials for allegedly falsifying business records to pay hush money to an adult film actress, Stormy Daniels, during the 2016 presidential campaign is scheduled to start in New York later this month. I mean, this is honestly the weakest of any of the cases, and I genuinely wish that this wasn't going to be decided first. I wish it was a more substantive, one of the cases that was brought against him, but they say that the former president is also appealing a New York judge's ruling that he pays $355 million with interest. That's actually going to be like $450 million for fraud committed by his businesses in New York, as well as a verdict from the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit worth upwards of $83 million for defamation after he sexually assaulted her and then lied about it repeatedly and smeared her. But they say depending on how quickly the high court rules on Trump's immunity claim, which is a separate thing, he could still face charges for trying to overturn the 2020 election in Washington, D.C. before this November's election. Two more cases are more likely to come later, in Atlanta, where Trump faces state charges for his 2020 election plot, and in Florida, where he's tentatively scheduled for a May trial on improper retention of classified documents after leaving the presidency, but a trial date is expected to be postponed. So it's a big win, but his court days are far from over. So, I mean, as I point out here, the key sticking points for me are basically like, when are these trials actually going to take place? Because we've seen the polling data showing that if Trump is criminally convicted by any one of these dozens of different charges that have been brought against him, if he's criminally convicted, that could make a difference in the election. That could be a deciding factor as to whether or not Trump wins in 2024 in November. So the question is, will these trials even begin, number one, or even finish before the November election? And it's looking increasingly likely that that is not going to be the case, where these cases in Atlanta, the case in Florida, that may not happen until after the election. So if Trump wins, all of this basically doesn't matter, right? Because you can't go and prosecute a former president in the same way that you can with somebody who's out of office. But I guess the most likely one, as they're saying here, is basically the 2020 election one that's being brought by Jack Smith for, fraud and doing the whole, bullshit, illegal strategy to try to get fake electors and all of that to illegally stay in power after he lost the election. So that's the most likely one that could, I guess, take place before November. But even that one is cutting it close. Like, we're talking about potentially having trials that are starting in like October or September, right? So right before the election, we could have these major trials that start to take place. So will that have an impact on the outcome of the election? Maybe. I don't know. But it's going to get absolutely insane and hectic, right? For obvious reasons. Now, another thing that we have to look out for from the Supreme Court is that they have just recently come out and decided that they are going to hear the case on Trump's claims of complete total presidential immunity, where famously one of his lawyers went and argued that, even if he ordered SEAL Team 6 to go assassinate his political rivals, if there wasn't an impeachment from Congress, then he could not be criminally prosecuted for that. So basically making the presidency into a complete dictatorship, into a kingship, where the president has complete authority to commit whatever heinous crime that they want to, knowing that they cannot possibly be criminally charged with it unless Congress, which is incapable of doing anything, impeaches them, right? So completely insane, dictatorial, authoritarian arguments that are being made by Trump and his team in that specific immunity case. But the Supreme Court is going to hear that. Now, I don't know which side they're going to come down on that. Obviously Trump nominated multiple members of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has made insane rulings in the past that make absolutely no sense and give incredible authority and power to the presidency, right? So I don't know, but I would hope, and I think that many experts who I've read about, they seem to think that maybe the Supreme Court wouldn't be willing to go that far and that they could rule against Trump in that case. But even if that happens, right, this delay tactic from Donald Trump to basically appeal and appeal and appeal until these cases get moved until after the election, that has been successful. Because regardless of whether or not the Supreme Court decides one way or another on his immunity claims, this is just one more delay tactic. And so that's really what you got to watch out for here. Because all of these cases that have been brought against him, they may not even matter at the end of the day if he wins, right? So, I mean, it's getting fucking crazy here, man. Now, moving on to Biden. Couple interesting things that have happened recently. Couple interesting data points that I just wanted to mention real quick. First off is this: how Biden aides are trying to shield the president from protests. The president's team has deployed tactics such as hosting smaller events and withholding their precise locations from the media and the public to minimize disruptions. So this comes after, obviously, multiple different instances of Joe Biden, of members of his campaign, including recently Joe Biden got confronted at a protest recently. They've been confronted over and over and over again over his endless support for a genocidal war in Gaza. And they're basically choosing, instead of listening to the protesters and acknowledging that that's a part of the democratic process, that's a part of having free speech in this country, right? Many of those people are your previous base of supporters who voted for you in 2020. Maybe listen to them. But no. Instead, we are going to completely black them out. We are going to avoid any sort of public appearance where there could even potentially be these kinds of protests. So you're significantly limiting the kinds of events that you're going to go to. You're only going to easy events, easy interviews with people who are going to give you softball interviews, right? And smaller events, as they point out here, withholding their precise locations from the media so you're getting less media coverage from it as well. What kind of a fucking campaign is this, guys? I mean, there was additional reporting showing that Joe Biden is now basically scared to go to college campuses, right? To do events with college campuses because he's scared of the protests against him. Guys, a Democrat who cannot make appearances at college campuses to campaign is not going to win. They're not going to be able to build a winning coalition. If you are too afraid of your own base of voters to be able to give public speaking events in front of the media and to explain your positions, then you're not going to win. And so this strategy that I've talked about before of Biden hiding away, I mean, it would be one thing if Biden was coasting towards a 15-point victory over Donald Trump right now. That would be one thing. Then maybe you make the excuse and say, well, we don't really need to, overplay our hand here, right? We don't need to go and put Biden in precarious positions where he may embarrass himself and whatever. That's not the case, guys. Look at the recent polling data that we've seen, right? Voters doubt Biden's leadership and favor Trump from a New York Times and Siena poll. So this one's closer than some of the other ones I've seen, but this one has in a head-to-head matchup 48-43. Biden losing to Trump at the national level by 5 percentage points. 10% say they don't know or they refused. Now, this doesn't even take into consideration RFK Jr., who is likely to be a name on the ballot, and when he's introduced in the mix, the situation does not get better, right? So, I mean, here from the Wall Street Journal, in a general election matchup, they have Biden only 2 points behind Trump, but then if it's a 5-way race, which is what it's likely going to be, Trump gets 40, Biden gets 35, RFK Jr. gets 9, Cornel West gets 2, and Jill Stein gets 1. So, I mean, even if you want to blame Cornel West and Jill Stein, which is a ridiculous delusional strategy to try to go with, but even if you add it up, they're 3 percentage points here, right? That still doesn't get Biden to beat Trump. Even if every single one of these people folded and voted for Biden, still doesn't get him there. And so, how much is RFK pulling from Biden? How much is he pulling from Trump? It's hard to say, but it looks like it's definitely not helping Biden. Right? It's not putting him in a better position. It's putting him in a worse position, at least in this poll. So, I mean, more data. This was from a different Times Siena poll as well. So, presidential leads among different variations of voters, right? Keeping in mind that we've also seen the polling data showing Donald Trump beating Biden with young voters, one of the core constituencies that won Biden the election back in 2020 and is a core constituency for any Democrat that wants to win at this level. But it also goes beyond that, right? So, presidential leads among all, plus Trump plus 4. Men, Trump plus 7. That's not surprising. Women, Trump plus 1. Women plus Trump 1. That's fucking insane. Okay, this is unacceptable for a winning coalition for Joe Biden. Whites, Trump plus 11. Not surprising there. Hispanics, Trump plus 2. Unacceptable. Blacks, Biden plus 51. Now you may say, oh, plus 51, that's a huge margin. Yeah, it is. Biden needs about plus 70, plus 80. Okay, so even this has been trailing off. Rural voters, Trump plus 32. Suburban, Biden plus 3. This is one of the main constituencies that Biden is claiming that he's trying to win over to defeat Trump, and you're only plus 3 in this poll. Urban voters, Biden plus 28. So, I mean, in the aggregate, again, you're losing some of your core key constituencies. You're losing a lot of black voters, you're losing a lot of Hispanic voters, you're losing a lot of women voters, you're losing a lot of young voters, right? You're definitely losing a lot of Arab American voters, to say the least. So what is the coalition that Biden is putting together here? What is he trying to do? Now, one of the other egregious things that I've seen recently, and I mentioned this briefly in a previous video, but this one was almost even worse, right? How abortion is basically the biggest gimme that Biden could ask for in 2024. It is basically the only major issue in which Democrats/Biden are beating Republicans/Trump. Okay, heading into 2024, where we stand right now. Abortion is the only one where their head is above water. The American people side more so with Democrats than Republicans. So you would think, if you're trying to run a campaign on this and lean heavily into this issue, right? Because Trump, his Supreme Court justice picks, they overturned Roe v. Wade, which they absolutely did. You know, all of these insane draconian crackdowns on abortion rights and IVF and birth control and all of these different things that Republicans are doing across the country. Perfect moment. Lean into it. Go as heavy as you possibly can. Be aggressive about your messaging on it, you know, in the pro-choice direction, right? What does Biden say? Here from Edingermentum. This is from, I believe, a New Yorker article. They say, I asked Biden what he would do in a second term to protect abortion access at the federal level. He said, pass Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. Okay, that's not a bad response there. They say Democrats would need to win control of the House of Representatives and gain seats in the Senate, but Biden expressed confidence. He says a few more elections, like we've seen taking place in the states, would suffice. You're seeing the country changing. Then Reiterating his position on Roe, he said, quote, "I've never been supportive of, it's my body, I can do what I want with it. But I have been supportive of the notion that this is probably the most rational allocation of responsibility that all the major religions, what the fuck, have signed on and debated over the last 1,000 years. First off, what are we doing? What are we talking about here? Why are you bringing up religions? This is not a debate between religions. This is a medical issue. This is a women's rights issue. Why the fuck are you talking about religious debates going back 1,000 years? What is going on?" Bizarre thing to say. But worse than that, he says, "I've never been supportive of, it's my body, I can do what I want with it." Rephrasing that, my body, my choice, a common refrain for pro-choice Americans, right? How are you, with the main issue that is the easiest layup for you to win people over or scare people if that's a tactic you want to go with for 2024, how are you saying that? Even if that's what you believe. Even if that's what you believe. As a political matter, why the fuck would you say that? He just effectively said, "I'm not in favor of the notion of my body, my choice." What are you doing, man? What the hell are you doing? I mean, what does that even mean anyways? It's my body, I can do what I want with it. This is just Republican framing on what abortion is. The idea that like women are just using abortion as a birth control method and that they're just going out and having abortions because it's fun. It's an average Tuesday night for us, right? That's not what's happening. Abortion is a medical rights issue. Abortion is a women's rights issue, right? So to frame it with this like right-wing framing of, oh, women just want to do whatever they want with their bodies. I'm sorry, who are you? Because this is your main winning issue and you're not doing well on it. So that was insane, to say the least. We also had this. Also, I think this was from the same New Yorker article. As pointed out here by Enningermentum, Jesus fucking Christ. Unsurprisingly, Biden's aides reject the idea that the White House is insular or dismissive of reality. Okay, I beg to differ on that. But this guy Jeff Zients, who succeeded Ron Klain as the chief of staff last year, pointed to Biden's reputation of soliciting opinions from critics. Wait for it. Quote, "Just the other day, he picked up the phone and called Larry Summers." Larry Summers. Even worse, Biden's other occasional calls range from the columnist Thomas Friedman to the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. And he said, that's how you pressure test decisions. Okay. So, as the Supreme Court hands Donald Trump an easy win here, right? As it looks like many of the numerous criminal civil cases against him are likely not going to be resolved by the 2024 election, and that Joe Biden is actually going to have to stand on his own 2 feet in order to defeat Trump and pull together some sort of a winning coalition, maybe of some of the people who he's actively pissing off right now. Instead of trying to build that coalition, instead of reaching out to the left, to progressives, to young people, to black Americans, to Arab Americans, to Hispanic Americans, to women, right, on abortion rights, instead of trying to reach out to any of those different core constituencies that he absolutely needs to win in 2024, Joe Biden is reaching out to Thomas Friedman, Mitch McConnell, and Larry fucking Summers. Do they even want to win? How is this just pure delusion, or do they just literally not want to win? The idea that you're going to say, oh, we're not in a bubble, we're reaching out to people who disagree with you. Really? But you're only reaching out to people who disagree with you from the right-wing reactionary frame point, right? You don't listen to the people on the left. You're not listening to Bernie. You're not listening to activists on the ground. You're not listening to, average working-class Americans. You're listening to Larry Summers and Mitch McConnell. I don't even know what to say at this point, guys. So the polling is looking abysmal. The one main sort of bailout that Trump would be convicted in one of these criminal trials that Democrats were crossing their fingers and hoping for, that's looking less and less likely over time. And I mean, with all of the blame that the left gets, with all of this shit that is thrown at leftists, oh, you guys are all trying to elect Donald Trump. You guys just don't care about, Trump getting reelected. That's why you're attacking Biden. It's utter bullshit. Everybody on the left who has the substantive criticism of Joe Biden is doing far more to try to pressure Democrats to not lose to Trump than any liberal who is putting their head in the sand and pretending as if Joe Biden is the strongest candidate they've ever seen in modern American history. He's not. He's historically weak. And you guys are digging yourselves in a hole, blacking out, and pretending as if he is on track to coast to a victory, when he is on track to get absolutely obliterated